G'day campers and welcome back to another Thursday night live around the Campfire Project. Around the campfire, sharing the warmth with us today is the amazing Angela Heise, leadership and emotional productivity trainer. Welcome, Angela. Welcome, Angela. I don't know how we're going to go.
Hi, Scott. Good to see you again.
Yeah, good to have you back. And like for a good conversation tonight, triggers are pretty important. So I'd like to also welcome for the first time Kim Dunlop to a Thursday night. Welcome, Kim.
Thanks, Scott.
So Kim's known as the dating doctor, so it's going to be interesting to hear what she has to say in relation to triggers, because I'm sure we get quite a few in dating. So, and then we've got Martyne Jones. Welcome back, Martyne. How are you today?
Hi, Scott. I'm good, thanks. Good to be back with you all.
Beautiful. Thank you. And Martyne is a life coach, an Arbonne consultant, and also a co-host with me inside the Sunday sessions open chat for men. So, and we often deal with triggers, so it's going to be interesting to open up that too. So I'm looking forward to this conversation. Triggers are a part of our life, and they can have pretty serious outcomes if we don't know how to process them. So today we're going to have a good look at them and see what we can bring up, and hopefully somebody can share with us a trigger or two that they may have so that we might be able to process it with them here. So I'm going to open up tonight with Angela. Triggers, Angela, what are they?
All sorts of things, as you so triggers could be, for example, a behavior that somebody has that triggers an emotional response in me. Or it could be a thought that I have that triggers a behavior that I have towards somebody else. So anything can trigger us, basically. We can trigger ourselves out, or we can trigger being triggered from the outside in. When they're being triggered from the outside in, we're really good at giving away the responsibility, and then we call it button pushing. Don't push my buttons, right? So again, I mean, this is the whole, I'm at the mercy of my environment, and you know, I'm being triggered. So they made me feel. So yeah, I've got a lot to say about this.
Yeah, brilliant. And I'm looking forward to talking about it, because it's something that the Tiara comes out with. So I'm looking forward to opening that a little bit further. Martyne, for you, what does a trigger mean to you?
Yeah, trigger for me is, if I'm plugged in by the words or the actions of another person. So someone calling me maybe a name, or a trigger could be, I could be triggered in by the news. I could be triggered by the news, but that's not a personal trigger. I might just be, angry about things on the news. I'm often triggered by injustice, but that's not a personal trigger either. So that can sometimes lead to a good outcome.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. So, Kim, for you, what are triggers for you?
So for me, Scott, triggers can come in all different forms. I've experienced it from music, being triggered by music, sometimes from words as well, and certain behaviour, which Angela was pointing to as well, and how you can get pulled in by something, whether it's a song, and even like something else I find triggers me as well is outfits, people's outfits. You could look at someone's outfit and be triggered by someone's outfit and go, oh, wow, that's a little bit different. So, yeah, I find in my own profession, and as well as myself personally, there's various areas where you can get triggered. So I'm looking forward to this topic tonight.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, let's open up the triggers, because, and thank you for that, Kim, because triggers can come in in so many different ways, so many varied ways. So I'd like to talk about, how do we know it's a trigger? How do we know something's triggering us? Because often in the past, I found myself reacting and not recognizing it was a trigger. So I'm going to actually throw it back to you for a second, Kim, and open that.
It's interesting. you know, when you look at that, Scott, and I think Angela kind of touched on it, it's more about why does someone or something actually trigger you, and where does it start from? And it just generally starts with an emotion inside. And I remember someone saying to me many years ago, no one can make you feel a particular way, Kim. And I thought it was a really interesting comment. And I kind of reflected on it, and I started to think about that comment, saying no one can make you feel a particular way, but there's something that's triggering within inside me. And as you said, Scott, it's either the reaction of a voice or it's some sort of emotion that's coming up in your body that you feel penetrated by something or some word that someone's either labeled something as, or they've said it in a certain way. And then it's then kind of looking at going, why are we attaching to that? Why are we actually attaching to that? And is it that they're showing us something different to our values or our beliefs? And then that's why we're getting reacted by it. So, yeah. So,
because it is a reaction to and if it's okay, I'd like to jump over to you, Angela, for this, because with the emotion attachment to a trigger, is that what makes a trigger activate in a strong way?
Yes. So when we have, anything can, okay, well, let me start again. We have an emotion because it gets triggered by a memory or by an outside stimulus. And you cannot have any kind of event in the past or it's thinking about something in the future without. Did I just disappear?
Yeah, a little bit.
Okay.
So,
all right. So anything everything has an emotion, but it's what we do with it that really matters. So if I and an emotion generally is attached to any kind of event that doesn't work for us. So the stronger the emotion, the more memorable the event, and the more I can get triggered. So if I have one event and somebody says something to me in a situation that's really, really meaningful to me, I will remember that forever. So we attach any kind of event to an emotion, and we can relive that at any time if the trigger is activated. So I always say, so do you remember where you were 9/11? And generally people say, yes, I definitely remember where I was. Well, do you remember where you were Thursday 3 weeks ago? No, because nothing really unusual happened. So the stronger the event, the stronger the emotion, the more memorable it becomes, and the likely it is that I'm going to react. So if somebody calls me an idiot in a really important meeting, for example, and threatens or questions my competence, that will probably stay with me forever. But if I am and I'm constantly by the same people and they keep calling me idiot, idiot, idiot over and over and over again, I'll start acting like that, and I'll get triggered really quickly. So it's either one event with a really strong emotion or constant repetition of the same thing. And then I will jump if I'm not aware of that. But if I know that that's what's happening, if I go, you know what, they can call me, I'm not an idiot, and I disable that emotional response, I will not get triggered anymore. It will be just, well, that's your opinion.
Yeah, brilliant. So we're hearing talking about negative triggers. Are there positive triggers also?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
How do you see them?
As Kim was saying, there's certain songs.
So Angela's in Brisbane at the moment. They're having big storms. We're in and out a little bit, but it's definitely worth hanging in there for. So how do you see the positive triggers working?
Same way. So you have a positive experience that, where you have this emotional high, and that can get triggered again. And you can have this in any way, shape, or form. I mean, it works through seeing something, through hearing something. You can smell something, it can trigger you. you can touch someone. Like if somebody touches you, I mean, my grandmother used to touch my cheek and go like this, and that would be, I love you. And so you do this, and I go, that feels really good. So you can have something, but I also had somebody, and I was demonstrating that, and I was saying, so this is, and he went, don't touch me. I had an aunt who used to do that, and I couldn't stand her. So, so it doesn't, so a trigger can be can go both ways.
Yeah. So I agree completely. And it triggers are what activate our emotions to deal with the situation. So if we've got a negative situation where we've triggered, what do you think a good response to that would be, Martin?
A good response?
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned before that, how do I know if I'm triggered? You said, and I react. Well, I think when you react, it depends on how big the reaction is. So if you're really pissed off and angry or whatever, then it's a really it's a big trigger. And we don't always, if we're triggered, we obviously need to look at, okay, what's in this for me? But sometimes it's such a bad memory that we react first. And, we might, have you ever really reacted and you think, shit, where did that come from? And really that's coming from the 6 or 7 year old, because you went back to that painful memory. So in that split second when you reacted, the adult's not running your life, the child is. So I think if we want to, handle it in a better way, respond and not react, we need to be able to, stop and, look at why we were triggered, what is it? And we need to be able to own those traits that we're not owning in ourselves that have triggered us. And as Angela said,
sorry.
Well, that could be mainly dark shadows. We call them in my, my coaching training, or it could be light shadows. You might see things in other people which you think, oh my God, he's so charming, or Angela's so charismatic, Kim's so sophisticated, and you put them on a pedestal. They're just traits you haven't owned in yourself.
Okay. So have you got anything you would like to add to that, Kim? Because you're smiling away with, sorry, got a bit to add.
I'm smiling away because I loved what Martin was saying. And look, I've triggered people in an instant, and I've kind of realized that they've reacted, but it's not through my behavior and how I spoke. And they've kind of reacted in such a way that they didn't do what Martin was saying and actually going, why are they reacting? And they didn't think about their response. And it was interesting because I went in such a lovely way. And so it doesn't matter whether or not you might be delivering a message to someone, whether you're communicating in a way that you could actually potentially trigger someone unknowingly. And that's where we don't realize as a responsibility for ourselves that even though you might deliver something in a beautiful, positive way, a bit like you asking Angela around the, can we get triggered in a really good way? You could be coming from a really good place with a positive intention around it, and yet someone else gets triggered from it. But in some level, you need to kind of look at how you have actually delivered that message and then work out from that how you could probably support that other person as well around the situation. So there's good and bad points with being triggered. And so I was kind of smiling because I was thinking about what Angela was saying and what Martin was saying. And I was kind of going, well, I've kind of just delivered messages from a place of love and people have been triggered. And so we can come from a really good place, with really good energy and trying to do the right thing or be seen to doing the right thing, whether it's in work or in family or coming from a place of love to share some feedback. And people can get triggered. But I think what Martin was saying is then just looking at it and going, stopping and just realizing and going, what is it that I was actually triggered by? Or was I part of that equation in potentially triggering that person, to then work out is the behavior acceptable? Is it not? And do I also have a responsibility to then go share with that person that that's not acceptable? So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's brilliant, because one of the things that has popped into my mind just listening to that is, who is responsible for a trigger? Who's responsible for it? Like, I think that's a big thing. Like, if you've triggered somebody, is it your responsibility to go and follow that up, to chase it up? Or is it the person who's got the trigger to own that and say, hey, I'm really triggered right now. What is it about that trigger? I'm going to ask you, Martin, straight under the bus. So whose responsibility is it?
Well, I think it depends on the situation. I mean, if you've come, as Kim said, from a place of love and caring, and you've delivered your whatever you had to say, and they triggered, then, you know, am I really responsible for the way I delivered it? Probably not. I think the person receiving it, if they triggered, needs to look at why they're triggered. Does that?
Yeah, look, it's an opinion at the moment. We're trying to open this up. So why would that person want to ask why? Say, okay, I've been triggered. Why would that person want to ask, why am I triggered right now? What would be the advantages of that?
Well, seeing what's in it for them, because if I'm, you know, suddenly I'm triggered by something you say, the world's always about me. So, you know, what is it you've just said that's irritated me, that's made me feel, oof. So I need to look at that so that I can hopefully find out what it is, own it, and work through it.
Yeah, brilliant. And I did throw you under the bus there deliberately, because it's something that we practice inside our conversations, is actually what to do if you're triggered. Because in life, there's so many different triggers. And to take responsibility for that trigger gives you the opportunity to grow from that situation and learn more about yourself. So therefore, you can engage in depth in the conversation.
Absolutely.
And that's something that's something that I'm very proud of. So
yeah,
I'm going to throw it over to you. Sorry, Martin.
Well, most of us would probably want to blame, and then we project it back, you know.
Yep.
You're also talking to me like that, you know. It's like, and when we're projecting, of course, one finger's pointing at you and three are pointing right back at me.
Yes, there seems to be a common theme on the Campfire Project. If someone starts pointing a finger, three come back at you. So I started pointing like that. So actually like that. So with three fingers.
It was just an example. It wasn't real.
Sorry, I missed that.
It was just an example. It wasn't for real.
No, exactly. Well, but this is a really important thing, and I'd like to throw it over to Angela for a moment, because the responsibility, I know Kim just opened that up, and I think responsibility inside triggers is the key to the trigger and also to the answer of the trigger. Angela, your thought?
You and I have had that conversation before, and that I actually like the word respondability over responsibility. So it's my ability to respond to a situation with integrity for the self. So if I feel that I have triggered somebody, and it was because it was something that was my intent, so I was doing something in such a way that it hurt the other person, that's one thing. If they perceive it in a certain way because their filters and their perception just allow just one way of filtering, of recognizing what I've done, and it's a conversation. And I think in both ways, it's about working out what's the best way to go about it. As Martin was saying, every situation is different. But I have had situations where people have said to me, "You so," and I'd say, "Well, can you give me an example of when I do that?" And they said, "No, I can't. That's just how you are." And I go, "Well, there's not really very much I can do about it. You know, that you will continue to be triggered until you can tell me this is the behavior that you do. that creates that response in me. But as long as you are saying you are like that, there's absolutely nothing I can do. That's like saying to me, you don't like the food I'm cooking, and I say, which specific dishes do you not like? And they go, no, I just don't like your food. Well, I'm going to keep cooking my food, right? Because I don't know which food you don't like. So I generally, I would always say, have a conversation. I mean, if somebody says, now it's my job to manage my behavior around them so they don't get triggered, because these are their own personal triggers. And I've had people, again, the same thing. Don't talk to me when you are tired or when you are yawning. That really triggers me. Or don't talk to me when your mouth is full. That triggers me. And it's like, those are instructions that I'm not really sure I can follow, because I will occasionally talk with my mouth full, and I may yawn occasionally. And so, that's not really something that that would put me on eggshells. So no. So it's always a two-way conversation. Where's the responsibility, and where's the focus? Let's put it that way. But it requires, in my mind, it requires a conversation between two people. Because again, if it's something that I do that is really something that doesn't work in general, I'm happy to change that.
Yeah, well, I think you just brought up something there that I think is a really valid point, right? Because if someone does say to you, oh, you're eating with your mouth full, and then you end up on eggshells, that's triggered you. How do you take responsibility to open that conversation up further than that? Because I think that's the key to this is, once you're triggered, you need to make sure you don't fire back with more triggers. So what can you ask yourself at that point to ensure you don't fire back with more triggers?
I take a deep breath. Yeah. And I may say, let me think about that, and I'll walk away. Because again, if I get triggered by that and I fire back, then it's just going to become, ping pong game and one trigger chases another trigger chases another trigger. So it's about interrupting that, just saying, let me just, and I generally say, go and have a vent to somebody who's got nothing to do with the situation. Just say, just hold the bucket while I spew, and just get it out of the system, and then come back to the person and say, could we talk about this? And I call that have a conversation about the conversation. So how can we deal with this in such a way that we don't get triggered in the future? And when it's framed like that, then it's generally a really good conversation. And if we get triggered again, well, then we'll have another conversation about the conversation after another bend.
100%. And that's conversation about a conversation. I like it. I like it a lot. So I want to thank you for that. And I want to throw over to Kim, because inside relationships, there's lots of triggers. And taking the responsibility of owning them is a really hard thing to do. I know that I have in my relationship. I have triggers that I sit here openly and talk about how I process my triggers. I ask myself, what about this is triggering me? And I still don't get it right. So, Kim, inside relationships, taking responsibility for those.
Yeah. I just wanted to say I love what Angela just said about the chewing with the food. Sorry, I get triggered by people burping, and so I thought that was quite funny that you said that about. And so, but I take responsibility of it. But I actually get triggered by it, and I actually hold on to it, because it's not my point to actually say anything to anyone. So I just wanted to share that with you, Angela. Those people need to take responsibility in some way, shape or another, that it's just their values, that they're holding. And so they need to sometimes hold that truth to themselves. Anyway, back on topic. Relationships,
That is on topic.
Yeah, okay, cool.
If burping is your trigger and somebody burps, you take the responsibility of owning your trigger and not taking that any further, because the value of that person in conversation, it seems, is higher than your trigger.
That's exactly it.
Am I correct in saying that?
Yes. And I think it's really important that the people who are getting bothered, because we're holding that energy. And if it's frustration, if it's labeled as frustration or anger, we're holding that energy in us. And I think sometimes our tone of voice, when we do get triggered, it's our state of mind and where we're at. We could be tired, and it could be all these accelerators that kind of put the fuel on the fire. And it's really just us then looking at it going, okay, I'm the one holding the energy. They're actually not bothered by it because they're doing it. They're choosing it. And so who are we to actually say to someone, oh, by the way, I'm triggered? There's a level of under responsibility, like in some ways. I think, and that's my personal opinion, that the person who's holding the energy of the trigger needs to take some ownership in actually addressing it for themselves. What is it that's bothering you about that? And and as Angela pointed out, which I love, is start the communication. And I've done that before, where I have actually said in one instance, this is actually my stuff. I'm actually triggered by you burping. And so I've actually said that to a friend in a really lovely way. And I said, oh, I just find it interesting. And, and so it was just my stuff. But I said, I'm not asking you to change because that's who you are. And you're owning that as well.
I sort of wish I had a can of Coke just so we can see how it goes. Because it's like something for me that I grabbed in that piece, Kim, and I thank you for that, is the energy of it.
Yeah.
Because myself, I'm a big believer that the energy we interact with people controls the situation. So if you're triggered and you act with that response of triggered, react, you're going to act with an energy that you may not necessarily normally carry into a conversation.
Yeah.
So slowing that down is really important to have a conversation about the conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Angela?
We just had a wonderful example when the door behind Kim opened. There were so many ways in which you could have responded, right? And you didn't. You just stopped breathing for a second, but,
Well, I'm surprised that no, I said, shut it. I just went, shut it really quietly to my son. But I thought no one heard it.
But you sat with it. You didn't overreact with it. How are you going to respond to it from
you
here?
didn't turn around.
No, I didn't. I know. I could see it. It was almost like, where's Wally?
But it's a big thing at the minute. Like if you look at
he wants to come in.
Real wave.
Say hello.
Explain what's going on. How are you, mate? Welcome to a live discussion about triggers.
Hello. Oh my God,
camera.
Brilliant.
She got big titty.
Can you stop it?
Bye.
Yeah, mate.
Something to liven it up.
Hey, but this is absolutely what we've been dealing with over the last 12 months. We've been in COVID. We're sitting down. I was working with Angela inside one of her courses, and Oscars came in. We're an important part. So rather than turn around and be triggered by it, I offered him in to let him understand what we were doing.
Yeah.
And I think the best thing we can do with triggers is work out an explanation for them. Take the responsibility and work that out. So right now, Kim, we've just had a situation with yourself. How did you feel in your emotions? Where did it go?
I actually feel quite calm. I think because I feel quite comfortable with you guys, and I think it's such an open forum. I mean, like, I suppose the only thing I was triggered about is what my son just said, but he needed attention, obviously. He needed to draw attention to himself, but that's okay because we kind of look at that and go, is that right in this type of forum? and he's kind of could be triggering other people. So I apologize on behalf of my son as a responsibility if it has triggered anyone. He's 12.
So it's funny though, because like I actually think it's the perfect opportunity to have a conversation about a conversation.
Yeah.
Because you can get and I'm sorry, please tell me to go away if this is wrong. But the opportunity for me, if that was Oscar, I'd thank him for coming in, being a bit cheeky, and then I'd sit down with him and I'd watch this with him and get that conversation about the conversation and give him permission to respond to how he feels that went.
Yeah, exactly.
So that we both get to grow from that situation. So rather than have it trigger me, I take it as an opportunity to teach and learn.
Yeah.
And open up more conversation. Is that unfair to say that? And I'm sorry, but that's just for me.
Oh, no, not at all. And I think I'm actually quite surprised that my son actually sort of said what he said, because there was already a situation when I was on the phone yesterday on a work call and he was triggered and he'd already come in from school and I was on this work phone. And so he's already been kind of spoken to and communicated to about his behaviour, which is his powers, which is his speaking and his behaviour, and how that accelerated, work situation. And so you're on the phone trying to do work from home in these situations, and luckily the person on the other end of the phone call was quite reasonable. So, but he could hear my son going off, so because he was frustrated and triggered that I didn't answer the phone. But so which is a good example really of how people can get triggered, because we're not available. We're not available, and that could be another piece. We're not available for certain people, that people can get triggered in the workplace, in family, when you're not emotionally available or, physically available. So, yeah.
And that brings up another amazing point, and which I'm actually going to throw over to Martin in a minute, because being present when you are having a conversation about a conversation, when you're acting on your trigger, the importance of being present to discuss it so that it gives value to that conversation. Am I making myself sort of clear around that? Is that sort of because when you've been triggered and you're opening up that conversation, you need to be 100% present so that your energy is at the right place.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to throw over to Martin for a moment on this, and especially about energy. I know Martin and I have a lot of opportunities around this because when we do a Zoom conversation, we have guys coming in with different energy levels, and those energy levels are really big triggers for other people because of past conversations that they've had where that energy level's been high, so they're expecting a certain result. So having the conversations about a conversation, Martin, what's your experience with this, and what wisdom can you impart on us on how to deal with these?
Well, I think having a conversation within a conversation, you have to be, as maybe Kim or Angela said, you have to, breathe. Maybe it's not going to happen right after the trigger. It might be the next day. I mean, for instance, my partner, not so much now, but not that long ago, if he couldn't get me, he would just keep ringing and ringing and ringing. And I could be on something like this and trying to hold it together. So, I had to have that conversation. I can't always be, if I don't answer, it's a good reason. I will always answer if I can, or I'll come back to it. But you've got to be, I wouldn't have that conversation late at night because I'm usually too tired, and I'd be, grumpy, short-fused. So that wouldn't be good for me. So I think you need to know when you're in the right space to have the conversation. And, as you mentioned, Scott, in the group, there's all kinds of personalities, and some without the social etiquettes, which, are triggering for some people and other guys in the group. So, and we have to we have to talk to them about that, because otherwise people are going to be really plugged in and maybe not come back, because this person is always interrupted, or this person is always about him. So I think we have those, as I said, was it last night, we have to have sometimes tough love conversations. And that whether it's with someone we don't know that well, or whether it's with a work colleague, or whether it's with a partner. Another example with my partner, he doesn't have a good memory, which used to piss me off no end, because I could tell him in the morning I'm on a call, whatever, and he'd forget. But because I now realise that he just doesn't have a good memory. So what's the big deal here? So I've let that go, and it's all kind of cute now, because I accept that in him. It's okay. And now I totally own that it's my stuff, because if he told me that he was doing something in the morning, I'd remember. Okay, we're different.
Yeah, and I'm sort of listening to that, and I touched on it a little bit before with Kim, and I think when you break down a trigger and you start to understand it is your trigger, you can sort of work out a value of it to the person. Does this trigger me enough that I have to deal with that? Or can I accept it for what it is, because I can accept this person and that's not going to be bigger than the relationship? Or is it something I need to talk about? So, and I'm going to throw over you, Angela, for this question that I have to ask, because I think what Martin's just brought up about when to have that conversation is actually something that's really, really important, because a trigger carries an emotion, as we started the conversation. We want to ensure that we're present and we've got our emotions as under control as possible to have a conversation. So what are the rough outlining guidelines to having a conversation about a conversation?
Well, if you start seeing the world in black and white, and if it's win, lose, yes, no, right, wrong, then you're probably in fight, flight. And at that point, all the blood in your brain will have that normally feeds the neocortex, where we do all our logical thinking, and especially this part of the brain, the middle prefrontal cortex, which is where we do the higher logical thinking, will have all been pumped by adrenaline. Adrenaline will have redirected the blood flow from the brain into the arms and the legs, so we can fight harder and run faster. Because the one thing that the Neanderthal didn't need when he was faced with a saber-toothed tiger was to think through the options. What am I going to do? Would this strategy work? Would that strategy work? Because by the time he thought his way through the options, he was probably cat food. So the brain has organized itself in such a way when we feel threatened, and that's a trigger. And that because a trigger is not just physical. Again, it can be emotional. It can be on any level. Somebody challenges my competence or my status gets processed by the brain and by us exactly the same way as a saber-toothed tiger would have been processed. So I can't think. My brain is empty. So and if I start filtering like that, and there will be certain physical sensations that go along with that. I might get sweaty hands, and my heart will start racing, or I will have that rushing in my ears, or I will only hear my inner self talk. I will only hear myself. I will not even hear what the other person is saying. Any of those symptoms basically are signals: do not have a conversation. This will go pear-shaped if you talk about it now. So this is why I say go and have a reset, breathe, and wait until your heart rate has come down, until you can breathe properly, and your thinking has gone from black and white to, well, as Martin would say, there's different ways of looking at the situation. There are more options than just one. And when that's the case, then I can have a conversation. Does that mean the other person can do that? Maybe not. Maybe they haven't gotten to that point yet. At that point, I would say, well, let's wait until we both feel that way. But I would probably not suggest to say, we wait until you feel better or until you've calmed down. But it would probably be good to say, maybe this is not a good time to have this conversation. Let's park this, or let's revisit this later.
So I agree perfectly with that. How would you open the conversation? Or like if you and I, and if we can I be brutally honest right now?
Mm-hmm.
So the other week I triggered you because I was disorganized because I had a lot of stuff going on in my life and I wasn't quite right. I got things wrong. But you grabbed me after the conversation and spoke to me. And you addressed it directly.
Mm-hmm.
What made that conversation safe?
Well, that's for you to decide, because I was the one addressing it. For me, the safety was in we're good friends. We've got trust. We know that we can talk about everything. That's one of the premises. And so I felt really safe saying that. And I knew that if it would go pear-shaped, we would have another conversation.
And I really appreciate us talking about this, because it was something that I did get wrong. It was something that did hurt you, and it was something that I had to take responsibility for. So when somebody's actually having a conversation with you about a conversation, you need to come into that with the responsibility of accepting what it is and try and understand more about it. Yeah.
You did that. You didn't say, "Oh no, that's wrong. That's not the way I meant it," or "Oh, come on, don't be so." The responses people have when they when they don't respond, but when they react, and there's just that flight response, and you didn't have that. You just went, "Yeah, I can see that," and then we had a conversation about it at another time later.
100%. And I really want to thank you for opening that up, because it's one of the things for me that is really, really important. It's that respect for one another. This is one of the reasons why the Campfire Project works so well, because there's things that get said inside the Campfire Project that trigger us. But every person here takes the responsibility to listen and try and understand more. And I think the best way to do that, I'm just putting my personal opinion on that, is, I'm sorry, I didn't realize I did that. Can you help me understand that further? We'll break it down and then try and find a way to respond. Accept the situation is what it is. Try and understand more about it and then find a way to respond. Both of you. Because if you both find a way to respond, the relationship flourishes from it. It grows so much further because you've actually taken the opportunity to grow together. So that was my two bobs. Kim, what are you feeling inside of this? What do you see that you think would have to happen in a relationship when people have to have a conversation about the conversation? Because more often than not, people don't even realize they need to have that conversation because there's so much going. It's a big one.
And look, can I just say, I just loved what you guys just shared, because I think that's really amazing. And I think it's so hard to pick the right words. And even because I think sometimes when just listening to you, Angela, or just hearing that saying, "Oh, it wasn't what I meant," I sometimes use those words, right? But I also back it up by explaining to people, I'm sorry if you've actually misread, or whatever it is, or how we ever frame it, right? There's so many different ways we can frame it. And then sometimes people can get reacted by that. But we need to become more specific. And I think when we become more specific around the meaning, and that's what I loved how you said, Scott, how you both evolved the conversation to really understand the situation more. And because we're making meaning out of the words. We're making full meaning out of the words. And we're assuming and we're going to assumption first, and which is the reaction part. So I think the assumption is the reaction, because someone in their head of going, oh my God, this word means this to me. Oh, that's what she's meaning by that. And so then I say to friends, oh, look, I'm sorry, you know, I can notice that you actually look like you're taken back by what I've just said. Can I ask you? Sometimes I'll ask because I can see that there was a reaction. But, you know, I think it's really important. And I as you said, Angela, and Martin said it as well, it's being in the right state, checking in with ourselves, knowing it, stepping into the other person's shoes and actually seeing what state they're in, to receiving feedback or giving feedback. Everyone's giving and receiving. And that's so important in a relationship. And so whether it's dating, whether it's friendships, it comes back to our values and holding that space and that emotional safety or that space, because Angela obviously felt that she could have that conversation with you. And so I love it. It was just a perfect example of relationship. And it doesn't matter if it's a business relationship or a personal relationship. It comes back to the basics. We need to all come back to the basics, which is basic communication, and start to communicate and go to someone, oh, do you mind me asking, what do you mean by that? And this could be a really good first step. If someone's triggered, they could say, do you mind me asking what you mean? You know, like, I'd really like to understand what you mean by that, because they could be constructing something in their head and it actually might not mean what that person's thinking. And it's completely the opposite. And they're making up all this movie in their head. So I kind of think if we can bring it back to baby steps and just start really, I think having a soft tone is nice rather than a reactive tone, or, you know, coming from a really, you know, or framing it saying, I really care about you. I want to share something that I'm feeling and I've been working through it myself in a responsible way, but it's still bothering me. Something like that in a relationship is a beautiful way, I think. And I mean, I'd ask you guys, what do you think? You know, if someone was to deliver that message, I'd be like, oh, wow, I'm actually happy to hear what this person's, you know, my partner's got to say.
Yeah, that's big, because there's a lot you said then, Kim, that I think was really prudent to this conversation. And the big one that I get out of it is that everybody's got different experiences, so you can never understand what somebody else is thinking.
Yeah.
So to actually ask the question to understand more about what somebody's thinking, I think is the key to actually opening up conversation and building a road together so that your relationship grows. It doesn't matter which one it is.
Yeah.
That is the fundamentals for building a relationship. Simply going to that point, asking for more information.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that.
And if I may say something, it's the word that I would avoid for these kind of conversations is the word why. It's not why did you say that? But as Kim was saying, so what specifically is this? Or what, you know, when you're talking about this, what specifically do you mean by that? Because a lot of people are saying, why? And that often ends up in an emotional justification. People start, because that's, you know, and then it can get really knotty and really swirly, because people go, don't question me. And, you know, I don't have to explain myself to you. And whereas when you go, I'm really curious, what do you mean by that? As you said, Kim, it just puts the whole conversation onto a totally different trajectory.
Yeah, brilliant. And I'm just sitting there processing a few things. Sorry?
Say that again.
So it turns it into curiosity rather than judgment or justification.
Yeah, that's exactly. Right. Yeah, love it.
That's exactly right, isn't it? Curiosity is the one that opens up more opportunity, you know, like, and it's, for me, sitting there, it's like when somebody has triggered you and you need to open that conversation, to ask, this is my way of asking, would be, I'm really sorry, I'm not quite sure I understood what you said there. This is actually how I understood it. Did I understand that correctly, or did you mean that in a different way? you've taken responsibility and you've shared the way you've seen it. So then they've had a look into the way you've seen it. So then they can correct you. You're vulnerable, but you're also open to opportunity to learn. And I find that is one of the greatest skills that Mr. Jones, now below me, spends a lot of time inside talking with all these guys. Like, communication for me, and I'm loving working with these guys. I'm loving it because communication needs to be continually worked on. And taking it to a safe place, like Angela said at the start of the conversation, and dumping it somewhere so you've got a trusted person, circle, that can correct you and help you to see it a different way, to go back to have the conversation about a conversation, is so important in life. We're all coaches. We all help people see those little bits and pieces, but we all need it ourselves as well. Just how many times on the campfire have I said to them, I need help. I've got this situation. Please help me out. But here's the thing. I'm taking responsibility for me. The day that I started taking responsibility for me was the day that I started to change. My journey improved. And it's not perfect. I'm growing all the time. But it's about that. And I'm going to, Martin, how much did you lose when you were out there before? But I really want to share some of your experiences with this, because you do a magnificent job of it with the guys.
Thank you. Yeah, just a little bit I missed before. So I think my internet suddenly got unstable. That triggered me. No end. Yeah, I think, as you said, once you start taking responsibility for yourself, then you have more peace in your life, because you're not forever blaming somebody else for how you feel. Because as Angela said in the beginning, no one can make me feel anything without my consent. So, if I'm angry, you make me so angry, actually I can't without your consent. I mean, if I said that to my ex, who's bipolar, of course, then that would cause World War III. Because I was just thinking then, when you were talking, in the ideal world, yes, you could have these conversations with people who are willing to learn and grow. I was with someone who was bipolar for 20 years and with very unreasonable behavior. So it's really hard when you can't reason with someone, it's very hard to have those kind of conversations. And if I said, what did you mean by that? Did you mean, or he would say, I know exactly what you mean by that. And that would be it. There'd be no getting around that. And even now, if he calls from England, and because he loves to believe that, COVID is a scam and the government are against, and I won't go there. So, if it gets a bit heated, I'll just say, okay, we should, or he might say, we'll leave it there. Yep, great. Because I'm learning to not get so triggered. But, as Debbie Ford always said, the bad news is the work is never done. You're never going to arrive. So you'll find more triggers. But as you said, I think owning those parts of ourselves that we get triggered in by from other people, finding the gifts in them, as I talked a little bit about on the other day with Kim and Scott, we can just have more peace. And then we can go on to, hopefully teach that to other people who are willing who want to learn. And I do love to, I question lots of people when they come out with statements, I might say, in a caring way, is that the absolute truth? And as Angela said, never use a why question, because why takes people into their story. So you always need to reframe it to, what, where, if, how, when question. Because then they kind of go, you ask them, if you say, why are you always late, Scott? Oh, well, But if I reframe that, you'd have to stop and go, oh, what? Because you'd have to think about it. The answer wouldn't be on auto.
There's you've heard of the nonviolent communication model, right?
Yes.
So in that model, it's a very, very simple process. When I see you come late, and when I hear you say sorry, for example, I'm late again, or just when I see you arrive late, I feel really angry, or I feel disappointed, or whatever emotion comes up. What's really important for me is that this punctuality is really important for me. So could we talk about that? Could you tell me how we could make sure that you're on time, or would you be willing to be on time, or how could we work on this so we would both be comfortable? I mean, this is in a long-winded way, but you could make that really short. But it is when I see you, when I hear you, I feel what's important to me is, could we talk about this? Or my request is. And the request is not a demand. It's not saying I need you to be on time so I feel respected. It's a request, and with a request, you always expect a no. And when the no happens and it triggers you, well, walk away, back and have a conversation about the conversation.
Yeah.
I'm just listening to that there, and the one thing that came to my mind right then was when to walk away. Because if somebody's not open to talking about a conversation, it's going to make it harder for you. At what point do you go, this is too much now. This is something important to me, and this person's not honoring that conversation. Because, and this is, I'm going to be a little bit cautious of time, because I think that opens up an opportunity of control for the other person that won't have the conversation, because they hold you in that pattern, knowing that you don't have the ability to have that conversation. I mean, I'm going off sideways, and I'm going through patterns in my life that are bits and pieces.
Okay. May I answer that? This
Please.
is where I would take the conversation. I would take the conversation about the conversation to another level. I would take it to the conversation about the conversation about the conversation, which would basically be, we have had this conversation several times about, and my impression is there is not, I see you do what you do, and I am not noticing any change. And I'm wondering what's going on, because at the moment, this, for me, respect is really important, or some reciprocation for whatever, some response. So how could we work this out? Martin, I would love to hear what you have to say about that, and Kim.
Yeah, well, I pretty much agree. I think you have to keep going at it on a different level, especially if it's someone who's turning up for you late time after time, and if they're not willing to respect your time, then I think we have to say, look, the one thing I have, which is the most valuable thing I have, is my time. And if it's disrespected, maybe we can't continue this relationship, whatever it is. If it gets, if there's no moving forward from the other person, nothing, no give, and you're coming from a place of, you're really doing your best to keep it really. I know before I did work on myself, I would have pushed buttons all the time, but I wasn't a nice person. I was blunt. So I know now if I'm coming from the right place, but I'm not getting it back, then if we keep accepting poor behavior, then it's becoming our stuff too. Why am I accepting this poor behavior from this person?
A few things that came up for me with what you shared, Angela. I agree with you. What I loved is how you pointed to some level of awareness in understanding where that person's at. Because when you actually start to share your values of, respect, or how you want someone to be turning up in a certain way to match your level of value. And if that person's turning up in a different way, I think the check-in, which is brilliant, is like, what's going on? Is there anything going on? Because I think personally, sometimes people don't have the capacity to actually respond in a communicative way, and they find it quite threatening. I've noticed with some, situations that there's just a different way to kind of look at things. And it kind of just, I agree with you wholly, but I've noticed in some situations that people are kind of scared to share out their voice sometimes. And it's difficult for them to actually have that communication. I've, had family members that have kind of been that way, and they'll prefer to walk away. And whilst we've already touched on it, there's a level of responsibility in them turning up and being present to that conversation. And a bit like what you and Scott shared earlier, you both were present, you both were responsible in actually talking through that. And I think that's really healthy. I've been in situations where I've had to pull my voice out of a situation and just hold the space where someone has actually kept on speaking. And I've realised that they needed to assert them, and, like, using Scott's word, control, to help hold on to that in some ways. And so I felt that it actually served me better to actually not speak in certain ways. And the silence was actually far better and greater. And actually then shifted the whole communication. So, yeah, it's a tough one, because I would love to have healthy conversations all the time with people, and I think that's really the best way, and I totally agree with you. But as Martin pointed out as well with his partner, I think you are really self-aware, Martin, knowing when to step in and when to share, to ask that question, because sometimes they're just not in the right headspace. And they're not wanting to look at it, and it's not available to them at that time, and we kind of just walk away. And I think that's the best thing sometimes.
I've just grabbed a term from you there, Kim, and I'm going to steal it.
Which one?
Healthy conversation.
Yeah.
We talk about mental health. We talk about physical health. We talk about all these healthy things in life that we need to be doing. Perhaps we need to start with healthy conversation. If we can work and focus on healthy conversation, it gives us the opportunity to have specificity, so then we can hear each other.
Yeah.
I'm actually stoked with this conversation tonight, because there's a lot in this, and this is actually how we have healthy conversation. This is how we grow together. We're sitting down, we're talking about triggers, we're processing it. There's a lot of comments in the comment box, and actually the conversation has answered them as we've gone through it. Two-way conversation, but who's responsible to set the tone, the expert or the novice? Well, to be perfectly honest, the expert should know how to listen to the novice, and then we teach the novice how to become the expert. Because an expert doesn't tell, an expert listens and understands before they respond. Accept, understand, respond. And I'm really proud of this conversation. We've gone over the hour, as we always do, but I'm really happy with that last piece, Kim, with healthy conversation. And from the looks of the nods and the smiles, that's what we're working towards, healthy conversation. So I don't normally do this, but I'm going to do a plug tonight, because luckily enough, Kim dropped in on a conversation with Martin and I, and we had a 2.5-hour conversation. It was meant to be for an hour, and it was a healthy conversation. Martin and I both help men to have healthy conversations every Sunday night. If you've got something that's triggering you in life, bring it to us, have a healthy conversation, and learn how to have a conversation about a conversation. Everything we've done tonight. So, and I want to thank you for that, Angela. A conversation about a conversation.
Yeah.
So I want to finish tonight on one thing. We've got 1 minute each. And I'd love for you to give somebody your best bit of advice about triggers and how to deal with them. I'm going to start with you, Kim.
Okay. My advice to anyone is if someone crosses your path or if a word triggers you, try and hold on to that for a couple of minutes or think about it, and maybe just sit with it and observe how you're feeling about it, and either write down on a piece of paper what that means to you and how that has made you feel, and then work out and choose. You've got that choice point after that to then choose whether or not you can process yourself and be responsible, or if it bothers you that much to then go and share with that person. But think about your state before you go and speak to that person and come from a good place, because you're actually resolving it for yourself and you're also helping the other person.
Beautiful. Thank you. Martyne.
Yeah, my advice would be if someone you're being triggered by someone, they're calling you something, that's not your stuff until you take it on. So, really to think about the name, whatever you're being called, they're calling you stupid, an idiot, whatever it is, because if that's something you were called when you were little or at school, then you probably don't own it in yourself. So, yeah, they're just projecting onto you. But if you react and you get defensive, then you project back because you can't own it in you. So really, yeah, just really sit with it and work out, is it your stuff? What does it mean for you? What can you do with that going forward?
Brilliant. Thank you. Angela.
Several things. Well, as Martyne was saying, I mean, don't mind read. Ask questions. That would be my big one. It's like, again, this is how I feel at the moment when I hear you say that. Could you tell me more about that? And the other thing would be, notice that when you change perception, emotions change, triggers disappear. So if you understand that a situation could be all sorts of other things, and that it is not about you necessarily. I mean, like the very trite example, somebody honks at you or pushes past you in traffic. That's not because they have disrespect you. It could very well be that they are on their way to the hospital or something else that's really important to them. So if I find that there's another way of looking at the situation, then the triggering feeling disappears. So the more flexible I can become in my thinking, the more I understand that there are various ways of looking at the situation, not just my way, the easier it is to let go of that emotion.
Brilliant. Thank you. And I'm going to finish up with mine. Be responsible for your triggers. We've sat here and spoken about it tonight. It's all about being responsible. Take ownership of your triggers. Pick up a pen, get curious, and learn about them. So I'm absolutely stoked with tonight's conversation. I hope you are too. And I can't thank Martyne, Angela, and Kim. Kim, first time on Thursday Night Live. Love having you on. Hope to have you on more often. Thank you so much, Martyne. Thank you so much, Angela.
Pleasure.
If you're going through something and you hear one of us and we sound like we've got something for you, reach out to us.
Mm-hmm.
We're actually here for that. We're here for you. We're here for us. Like, I spend my life in here learning from me, so I feel guilty as because it's all about me, yeah. So, but I want to say thank you. I've got the best cancellers in the world every Thursday night. I choose it for me. Oh, brilliant! I love it. But I want to say thank you to everybody because I've adored tonight, and I really hope that people get out of it. So yeah. So thank you, Kim.
Thank you.
I hope you've enjoyed tonight.
I've had an amazing night. Thank you for having me, Scott.
No worries at all. Thank you, Martyne.
Pleasure.
Thank you, Angela. And we'll see you all next Thursday night. Who knows what topic's going to come up. I'm sure it'll be something juicy. All right. Take care, guys, and we'll see you next Thursday. Thank you.
Yeah.